Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Shut the F Up. I am here with my excited co-host,
I,
Alison.
I am excited, but not for the same reason that you seem to think I'm excited. So, yeah, everyone, welcome to episode 2 of our Disability Power podcast. I'm excited, and Murray is sad right now, but for very strange reasons. I am wearing a Team USA shirt right now. I just want to say today is June 19th. We were supposed to do this yesterday. We're recording today, so I do want to recognize Juneteenth as the holiday that it is. And at some point during this, we are going to talk about implications of this Juneteenth and the broader, what we're talking about when we talk about disability rights. So I'm excited about that. So I'm wearing this as a sign of freedom and moving forward in the USA, hopefully. Not in a sign of us apparently winning a football match today in the World Cup over Australia. But that
Apparently,
happened as well.
it's not over yet. Oh, no, no, I think it's not over yet. There's still 5 minutes. There's always hope, Alison.
Right, right.
We always have to have hope in celebration of June 19th or Juneteenth. We always have to have hope that things will get better.
Abs Absolutely, that will. But I think in this case, just to make the comparison, is it still 2-0?
Yeah.
I don't think that Australia is coming back, and this is one of the few times I don't feel too strongly about the kangaroo, socceroos, whateveroos.
I had some American friends text me about hearing that our team was called the Socceroos, and some not very nice comments about Socceroos. I will say that having love for your national animal in parallel to your sport that you play shouldn't be something that people make fun of. You Americans have some poor taste sometimes.
Well, I agree. I also saw some of the Australian chants that they were preparing for today, which I will not share on here, but actually made me laugh pretty hard.
Yes, probably shouldn't share. We can get a little rambunctious, but you guys have a an interesting little cheerleader yourselves. I think his name is General Grant or General Chant is actually what his name is, but he dresses up like General Ulysses Grant from the Confederate Army, and he bangs the drums and wears the Confederate hat and
Wait,
does all the American stuff. So,
so wait, is it Grant from the Confederate Army or from the Union Army? Because Grant
oh,
was a Union.
well,
And that's a big thing that we probably should distinguish today as well.
yes, I understand. Uh, Actually, yes, the Union Army is correct.
Thank you. I would have had a lot of, you would have had a whole shut the F up if we actually had
Yeah,
somebody from my country doing that. That would have
right.
been really inappropriate. Not just today, every day.
Yeah, General Grant from the Union Army. So
Mhm.
he is dressed up in his Union garb for sure.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Good save. See, that's why I have you here to
Yeah. In fairness, anyone listening, I just do want to remind you that our my co-host is from Australia.
yeah.
So sometimes we're just updating him on history. We don't know enough Australian history either. So in fairness.
All right. So let's get into this episode. We are talking about the DEI spectrum today. And I'm looking forward to this episode because the DEI spectrum is vast. It covers a lot of ground. And you, in your history as the disability rights lawyer and activist for disability rights, you would have seen how the intersections happen across the DEI space. And so let's talk about that broadly. Then we can kind of get into our shut the F ups top three, and then we can discuss the topics.
Yeah, well, I got to do my first shut the F up for the week is DEI being villainized. These three letters that I do want to challenge. If you do not know these letters and you're listening, please. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know many people do know it. I know many people don't, but three letters, if they're going to have that much power, shut the F up if you don't know diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And
So
so that space of diversity, equity, and inclusion is fairly encompassing. And obviously, you across the world and myself in Australia and different countries that I've visited, it has different levels. It's kind of like a ladder of what that country values or devalues in some cases most. Tell me about your experience in the DEI space around the world. What has
yeah,
stood out as
I think
good
I think
and
it's
not so good?
yeah. I think absolutely. It's a level of value or devalue, but also keeping in mind that different countries interact, especially with disability, right? Some of us will very much will say it's disability rights and it's a legal infrastructure. And therefore that's where we place it. Which is just interesting. And then other countries did see it as more of the social cultural thing and placing it really within the DEI infrastructure. Now, the question in the US in particular is why wasn't it both? Why can't it be both? And so I think it's worth noting kind of the emergence of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, this term, and where, wherever you stand on it, I want to make sure that we're really just parsing out today how disability has been interpreted, right? Because this is a disability power podcast. So we want to go through kind of the issues that we've seen and where does disability fall now and how and where do we see the future going? But in 2020 in the US, we had major race riots following George Floyd. And a lot of initiatives here in the US started with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Not as a direct result, but if you sort of look at the history, you're having a similar time period. Now, one of the things that happens over the next couple of years here in the US was, let's talk about it in a workforce setting. So workforce initiatives you would have within programs in a workplace, whether that workplace be at a university, whether that be a healthcare setting, whether that just be a nonprofit organization at a local level, working on an environmental issue, starting to look at how are we doing as an organization across our strategy, our strategic plan? Are we including race issues in some way or another, no matter what type of work we do, right? Are we looking at gender? Are we looking at sexual orientation? So we went through that stuff in a workforce in that setting, right? And one of the things that really caught my attention as a disability person, as someone with a disability who's worked as a disability rights lawyer for now almost 20 years in the US and globally, was an interesting time period for, again, what about us? Where is disability in this conversation? So I started looking at a lot of these conversations, getting involved, looking at organizations, looking at their systems, their strategies, and just noticing an absolute, there was nothing. There was nothing. And even when we started to have a deeper conversation, what are some of the basics you can do to start having a more inclusive, diverse workforce and have it feel everyone feels like they belong, right? Disability, there seems to be, some natural places that would be easy. And unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, we did start to see that where I would say obvious disability things started to get put in, right? We'll do an accessibility training, but the training wouldn't really dig deep. It would be a basic accessibility training, maybe on physical accessibility. It would talk maybe about ramps. It would talk about basic online accessibility, but we didn't really, in my opinion, see it get layered. We still haven't seen it. So that's, I think, where we are still to this day in the US. I will say where this conversation comes up for me very strongly is having seen it for years, sort of disability wasn't part of the discussion of diversity, equity, and inclusion until it was. And that's really the negative of when we can stigmatize disability that was never included, but then we've definitely heard rhetoric out of people. We've seen funding cuts related to it, disability. And again, it's like, wait, disability wasn't even included, but now we're the first group that we're going to be talking about in a negative way. So that's where it came for me. I know in Australia, I know in other countries as well, that the history is a little bit different. You have countries that have ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and definitely have a more in terms of day-to-day social, how things are coming into the workforce. I think that disability was put, especially visible disabilities, more apparent disabilities, were definitely put on a very similar platform as many of the other DEI portions on workforce. And I actually ask you, if Murray, if you don't mind kind of jumping in on that with Australia.
Yeah, I think it's an important topic. Certainly, I think we've always had a strong understanding and appreciation for people with a seen disability or a visible disability. We've had, strong, I think, strong policy and procedure around that in the workplace, and then obviously through sport, through our Paralympic team. But you're right. I think the bigger issue is the invisible disability and how that impacts someone's judgment of another person. And of course, within that disability sector, those of us who have had maybe invisible disabilities have to advocate sometimes harder than people with a more obvious disability that can be seen. So I think certainly in the job market and in the employment sector, that has been a major issue on two sides. One, where somebody with an invisible disability gets a job and then has to ask for accommodations. Often, the employer is resentful that they didn't talk about their disability during the interview, and that's been a topic that has had to really have a lot of advocacy around it, and rightfully so. I think from a job.
And just a really quick thing, the legal right, just so anyone listening doesn't know this, both Australia, the United States, Canada, UK, many of the countries, if you're listening, and the legal right is you do not need to disclose at an interview. So legally, you don't have to.
Yeah.
So sorry, Murray, go ahead. I just wanted to.
I think that's important as well. Having had jobs as a CEO, as an example, in Australia, I don't disclose because I don't want people to have a prejudgment of what my disability is, for a start, and then what my performance might be as somebody with a disability. So I always want to put my person first in an interview setting, and in talking to many people in the environment. They are of the same, I guess, mindset that they don't want that prejudgment. And although the law states that obviously you can't prejudge and pre-select, we all know that that's not the case and hasn't been the case. And so we are, fighting for rights on every level all the time. And even in advocacy, there's some good programs in Australia that will fund adaptive or accessible technology. So the money isn't the issue; it's the stigma of the disability that is still the issue, I believe.
Yeah, well, you make a really good point because you just spoke to it directly as to that you still would not bring it up in an interview. For me, this is a very interesting topic. People ask me a lot. A lot of my interviews over the last however many decade are largely going into some sort of disability rights positions. So having the lived experience of disability is important to talk about. But prior to, if there's other things, I don't know, right? And I think that says a lot to have both of us be saying this, that people who are listening, if you have any form of a disability that is not apparent, when you're in an interview process, that we understand this. This is not something. I'm just saying that the legal right is on the one hand that you do not have to disclose, but the day-to-day, what is the stigma we face in society and what is real? That's an important thing that Murray just noted.
I want to come back to a point that you said, because for the last kind of 3 jobs and now in the current company that I own, it is in that disability space. And you're right, it's the pendulum has completely swung where my lived experience, both in corporate and in sport and general, has played a massive role in me being able to get contracts and jobs. And so it's that double-edged sword that I'm sure you faced and you just talked about as well, where if we're in the mainstream, it's viewed as somewhat of a negative or a misunderstood benefit. But in the sector, it's always thought about as usually a very strong positive thing if you've been able to achieve things with a disability. And I think that's an interesting dichotomy where we have to take a step back and realize that it doesn't necessarily have to be thought of in that negative connotation when you're in the mainstream. I talk to a lot of employers who have employed people with disability, and I would say definitely the majority of them speak quite highly of the person's dedication to their work, turning up on time, making sure that they're there, doing the extra work, because they value their job probably more than somebody in the mainstream who doesn't have a disability. And I hear that well. That's never spoken about, though, in the broader topic of this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we could say that they value their job more or not. I think it's possible, but I think that obviously people with disabilities, we're humans as well. Sometimes, some of us have different work ethics than others. I don't think that's a disability thing, but I do understand that. I do think though, in the mainstream, when you're applying for jobs that aren't within a disability sector, that we have seen what I would say is a shift. Again, anyone listening to you are seeing people like in their calls for applications and stuff that will indicate, if you require this, they'll put the things down that are legally supposed to be there, but it's clear that they mean it, that they're trying to hire people with disabilities, or they're trying to really be inclusive. And this speaks to the DEI, not just in the how the workforce, right, initiatives, but actually the hiring processes, which again is a whole other, I mean, there's so much stuff when we talk about DEI. That's why I worry that people don't even know what the letters are first, but it's super broad. There's a difference between hiring processes having a DEI initiative in it versus actually the culture, the practice of the organization, right? But I do think, that there are places and spaces that you're going to find in the job market that are very much open, inclusive, and understanding, have the understanding of why having a diverse, inclusive, accessible team is a strength.
And, I kind of mispronounced what I was trying to say before. I think that because it is a lot harder for a person with a disability to get employment, basically due to the employment statistical data, that's pretty evident. I think, they're not likely to go and try and find another job. They're more loyal to the employer and stay at a job maybe longer on the whole. So it seems like now, and even the people that I employ that don't have a disability, they're always looking for that next job, and there's no loyalty as much as there used to be. Where I think someone who has got a job and is in a good environment, really doesn't want to look for something different. They're happy to stay in that environment.
Well, and I think that you're actually speaking at the two sides of the main parts of DEI, which is the environment, creating that environment. How have the organizations you've spoken with in Australia or the United States, whether, we're calling them mainstream. And so everyone understands when we say that, I think we just mean that they don't have the specific focus on disability sector. But how have they created that environment? Because I think that that's where people get a little bit confused. They think it's literally DEI is just hiring practices, and I think it's a lot more than that within an organization. Do you want to give any examples?
Yeah, well, I think generally it's a discussion, or the ability to understand that needing to have assistive technology, as an example, isn't necessarily going to make them worse or slower at their job and their duties. And so it's employers that have taken the time to have that discussion and understand what the adaptations are in an environment that have really made that employee from a disability standpoint work. And it really is, it's no different than, everyday society, right? Is if you take the time to have a conversation and treat somebody as a person, then you're going to have a better outcome than to just assume. And, recently we've come across so many instances of people assuming they know what they're talking about with DEI and disability employment, and just take it with a broad stroke, and who are uninformed, and then, make broad statements that really impact the whole of the spectrum of disability employment.
Yeah, employment, and really our understanding in society of disability, which we're trying to challenge as well by just being like, shut the F up. You guys, you have to listen, you have to have these conversations. And I think in the same way that an employer who's going to create an environment that people with disabilities and people without disabilities, everyone feels included, is gonna go above and beyond in the other areas as well that we've talked about, right? Again, that's not a hiring thing, that's within the organization stuff. And it is beneficial for people to feel like they belong. As you've mentioned, it creates loyalty, it creates passion about the work. A lot of times a lot of the metrics that you look at for work performance have improved via strong DEI programs like in a workforce. Again, I'm not talking about the employment at the moment. When I switch over to the employment, that's where these two things get, so it's like, oh, a DEI hiring thing, it hired only people with disabilities. We have seen that under attack, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. We're just talking within the organizational infrastructure, right? The day to day.
And I think information is power, and ignorance can also form itself as some people who are scared to have that, someone who's scared of someone who's different than they are, and that's also a really prevalent part of the DEI spectrum, is that if people don't know, then they're scared because they're not like you. And I saw this this week, actually, just on social media. I was scrolling through and come across this TikTok battle, and there was a gentleman, and then there was another guy, and they were very different people, obviously from different spectrums of life and values and everything. And one just really tore apart the other. And the other was kind of just being themselves. And it really struck me that this is the challenge in the DEI space, right? Is as soon as someone comes across anybody who's different, rather than engage, they'll attack. And that's the first mechanism. And so we have to start to walk away from that, because that's really not only diversive, but it borders on hate. It creates so many negative connotations really for society. And we've got enough challenges right now with our society than to go down that route, but it's been prevalent for a long time. And obviously, Juneteenth, there's a history of this, right, in spaces. And so I think we have to shed light on these things that are happening and talk about the fear factor of disability. And just as somebody who's worked in sport, the past kind of 10 years, I'll talk to mainstream coaches who say, Murray, I really would love to do a tennis program for you, but I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing, or I don't know how to act around people with disabilities. And, I don't want to get kind of cancelled because I say the wrong thing, or I don't know what I'm talking about. So that is real. I've come across many, many times where the fear factor of disability really puts people off.
Yeah, can I ask you, because I always find that interesting. It is very real, just so anyone who's not aware. And I do think that there's people I know in my work, in my career. I have certainly worked with people, with disabilities who may have instilled that fear. May when somebody asks a question where they actually want to learn, or they've made a slight mishap with the wording, or anything like that. They get taken
Yep.
down.
Yep.
And I do understand I have a disability. I understand, that we can get questions every day, but I have come to learn, and as a person with a disability and working on it, that there's a difference, a big difference between people who just genuinely, they don't know what they don't know. We don't learn anything about disability in school. Can I just ask though, does anyone give you examples? Because that's even more so, if somebody has been like, I want to do this, but I don't want to do the wrong thing. I've tried it once. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the wording and the language is usually the big thing. So it's, I don't want to use the wrong language. I'm not up to date. The language is changing all the time.
Right.
I don't want to offend anybody. And so that's the biggest thing that I hear generally. I'm always that kind of person who's like, all right, listen, you can ask me anything you want right here, and let's have a conversation about it. Because if you're curious about something, or you've always wondered about something and you don't want to offend anybody, I'm your safe place to be able to have that discussion with. And I don't mind, what you ask me, but I want you to feel more comfortable in this environment. I think it's really important. And sometimes we lose that perspective from the disability side too, where we do get very annoyed at people who don't understand, but the majority of people don't understand. And I think we have to come to terms with that and always be educators. As painful as that sometimes can be, we have to understand that in order to change that narrative and to change that discussion, we have to frame it in a better way. And there's always that section of people across the disability spectrum in any demographic of disability who will take offense to everything that's said. And that's their choice. Everybody has their own choice to be who they want to be, but it does put a lot of people off and does make that fear factor distinctive. So I think as a disability spectrum, we need to work harder to be able to build campaigns. I'd love to be able to see some type of collaborative across that disability spectrum on International Day for People with Disabilities, to have one voice as a disability organizational group and say, okay, this is what we really want to put forward as things to make that fear factor go away in the mainstream. And I don't see that enough, to be honest with you.
Sure. Well, I also think that it is exhausting. I mean, we're both, we both have disabilities. We know that we don't always, even I do this for work and I'm happy talking about it. I don't always like every single, I don't owe it to every person in the general public that I have to educate them. I know a lot of people listening are like, man, it's exhausting. Yes, it is. Absolutely. Unfortunately, but so is all of the barriers, the challenges, and the ableism that we experience. So to the extent, I do understand that there's even times with me where I'm like, I don't have time, I don't have time for this. I'm not rude to somebody that,
Yeah,
that is generally trying to learn, but once in a while it's kind of like, I just don't have, time for that. I think that's okay to do. And it's okay to hear the fact that we know it's exhausting and it's really not fair. It's not fair that because education and other systems haven't talked about these issues, that it is on us at the moment. But at the same time, nothing about us without us. We don't want people making decisions and having conversations without us. And we have to, really get into those conversations. So it's kind of a balancing act, you know,
absolutely.
yeah, you don't have to educate every person. But I think also what you're really talking about as well, that's a super, or at least I'm talking about, I'm saying you're talking about, is there is a difference though. We run into so many people in our day to day that just genuinely they don't know. They ask questions. They ask some of the questions I get asked frequently are like, "Ugh, do I have to answer this again? What do you see? I don't know. I'm legally blind. Like I don't know
Right.
what do you it's my normal, like what I see." So
Yeah.
people you have to start that. But I know that they're people that are asking that, my friends, my family, they're not trying to be, they're trying to learn from a person that they know they can ask questions.
Yeah.
There are people though I've met in life, and I think we all know this. Everyone, by the time you've gone through life a certain amount, you do know some people are never going to change their mind. They're going to double down, and those are definitely not the people that you need to waste your time on. If you like, so but understanding there's a big difference because the majority of people out there just don't know what they don't know.
And I
And
think well, I was just going to say the other thing around that is that there's a portion of the disability community who, and I've heard this a couple of times recently in the last week, where people have joined support groups who have just been diagnosed, or when they were diagnosed, joined support groups, and it can be a fairly negative environment, And disability is hard, and I don't blame people for having a tough day and taking that negative approach sometimes because it just gets too much for you. But what tends to happen there is that people in the spectrum themselves find it hard to get lifted up. And I think like that's the other thing that we need to address as a disability, I guess, collaboration. And when we talk about things like Disability Pride Month next month and International Day for People with Disabilities, those are things that we also have to understand because a lot of the time that comes from crossover people who've just got that disability and who have lived a mainstream life or a life without disability, and so then they're crossing into the disability spectrum depressed about what just happened to them or what they've been going through, and that again can cause mainstream disinformation about how bad something can be. Like you and I have been legally blind for a long time, and we have had very successful careers, traveled the world, been very independent, done a lot of things. But not a lot of people have had, or not many people have had that type of life. And I think it's important to understand that there are people who can achieve those things with a disability a
yeah,
lot. And there's a lot of people with really strong careers and have had amazing
sure.
lives, but it comes down to an individual thing. But there's just a spotlight on that disability side of it. I think about some of the comments that we'll talk about in a minute. And I think, that's really true of the mainstream is that there's people without any disabilities in the workplace that are better or worse at things, that know more than the other things, but it's not under the spotlight that disability always is. And that disability spotlight really plays a huge part in how people see people with disability.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that a lot of people with disabilities, in that I've interacted with that maybe have, so I have a law degree, I have a master's degree, and I feel like a lot of the education I got was proving something. I was still at a point in my disability journey that I really felt I had to prove things. I had to get people to get people to leave me alone and shut the F up is to get a higher education, to do this, to do that. That's not the case. Anyone who's listening to this, that's not necessary. You don't have to prove a thing to anyone, including any of us. If you're new, if you've just joined, if you've just become disabled, you're human. We welcome you. We want to have these discussions. We are a huge group. We are the largest marginalized population in the world. People with disabilities. Anyone can join it at any point. Everyone, you're one accident, illness, um, anything away, right?
Yeah.
So we don't have all the same opinions or feel the same way. I do think a lot of us, though, have felt like we've had to prove things, and I just want to say you don't, especially to any younger women with disabilities listening. You don't. Just be you, and and with support groups or any of that stuff, I think some of where I hear the challenges there is where people are not recognizing other people's stories, other people's journeys. I'm in a very different phase now than I was, years ago or whatever. Um, so I can't necessarily, I'm not maybe the best person in a conversation with somebody who's just going through vision loss right now in terms of like a day-to-day, how I can provide support, how I can, how did my transformation happen? How did your transformation, Marie? Where did we find power in our journey? I think is really interesting and useful for people to hear, even as they're just starting, whether it be vision or whatever the disability. But in the day-to-day, it's like I can't exactly remember where I was then. And a lot of other people can. I think there's a lot of other people that are better to have those direct relation. And I think that's where people don't realize it's like you're there, whether it's to support, whether it's to build, whatever it may be, that like what is your role when you're saying something to another human being? Remember that somebody's hearing it, feeling it, like you don't want to hurt their feelings or whatever. How are they going to perceive it?
Yeah, it's 100% true. And I think, again, it's an individual story, right? It's an
Yeah.
individual passion. I think you have to have the hunger and the desire. Part of it, like you said, is to prove people that you can do it, that you're an equal. And we shouldn't have to prove that, but it's just how it works in the disability space is that you have to overcome challenges to be able to get really where you want to be at. And, I do a lot of work with teenagers with blindness and low vision and across the disability spectrum. And I get a lot of questions about, well, how did you become a CEO? Hard work,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Dedication, motivation. There's no substitute for those things, no matter what you have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like that's important. Sometimes we focus on the disability aspect rather than the person aspect, and that's what takes over the discussion. But at the end of the day, we're people. We're all
Exactly.
people with any kind of disability, with no disability. It's a person first type of thing where you have to be motivated, you have to be driven, you have to be conscientious, you have to be a learner to be able to understand and get to the point that you want. And that's for anybody, right? But
Yeah.
that gets lost in the highlight discussion that disability attracts in negative settings.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean, disability attracts a lot. I think that this is going off that topic a little bit, but again, just thinking of it for people that have been have a disability or have more than one. I definitely will say that my blindness journey and my endometriosis, so going into a chronic pain, chronic condition, have been very different. And in one is, a little bit easier to talk about. And I don't think it's because I've been in it longer in terms of blindness. I just think that we still live in a world. So there's so many people who have chronic pain, chronic conditions that are happening now that, I feel like a lot of people are like, want their medical documentation and stuff. They're all faking this stuff.
Yeah,
No, why are they going to the doctor every day? I mean, if you're faking and you're going to a doctor every day, you probably have something going on, even if it's not the pain condition. Okay. But yeah, it's interesting because I think like for myself, I'm constantly thinking about how I analyze, how I think about, and how I, when somebody's new to that, how am I responding? How am I helping? How am I thinking about it? And I think that's something that all of us, again, when I feel like disability is constantly kind of, we have to be there for each other because an attack on one is an attack on all. And when I feel like we're getting attacked on various angles because it's like disability, just throw it in a thing, like we need to start really understanding each other as a broader movement.
yeah, 100%. And I think it's that disinformation from uninformed people that really push us back many, many years. And but it is the same in mainstream, and I talk about mainstream all the time. So, that's just my word that I use to delineate. But it's I think we lose sight of the fact that all employers have judgment on all people, right? There's times where I've been in a workplace where there's obviously someone who doesn't do their share, right? And calls off all the time. And what that does, it affects people who have endometriosis because when they need to call off for a valid reason where they can't move, and get out of bed physically, then they're seen as that lazy person. And that's the human nature that comes from not being informed about the individual person and the relationship with that person as an employee. But that's what everybody fights, and in the disability spectrum, we fight it at the front end rather than the back end. So not necessarily something has to happen for employers to think of us in that light. they already think of us in that light, unfortunately, many times. Now, there's obviously cases where they don't, and that's great. And we need to make sure that we're doing more to be able to
Yeah.
educate, that discussion and that dynamic.
I mean, there's definitely, and we should note that I think that we've definitely seen a lot of, as easy it is at times to be like employers or this or that. There's a lot of the not great examples out there, but there are examples, and I do want people with disabilities to be aware that there's examples of great organizations that you're going to work with that you'll have an opportunity that will probably, if they don't have anyone else with a disability, or at least somebody who's disclosed their disability yet, may be very open to a lot of your ideas beyond just what you need for accommodations, right? And that's kind of, and I just want to put it out there because there are places that are like that. So again, I think we can get exhausted and, when we have a disability and some of the pushes and the fight it and the this and the that, we have to always, and our employer is going to be tough and this is going to be tough. There are going to be places though that hopefully, you're able to find, and hopefully we keep pushing together and we keep making that happen.
And there's many places, we talk about obviously the challenges, but there are many, many places that people with disabilities work and have an outstanding work-life balance. So that's always true. We always tend to talk about the negative, but we have to get away from that a little bit, like you said. And I think we need to focus on that there are opportunities. There are people who want to employ people with disabilities, and they can earn an equal wage and they can have, a successful career. So find those people. A lot of the time when we talk about interviews, and I'm always big, I've interviewed and hired a lot of people. It has to be a fit for you as well as a fit for the workplace. So if I'm in a job interview and someone is ignorant to disability, or I feel like it's not a great culture fit with the company, I'll make the decision, even if I get offered that job, not to take that job. And we have to be confident to be able to do that, and not just settle. I think, that's one thing that I really want to change in this environment is we're not lucky to work. We're not lucky to get a job. We deserve to get a job based off our ability to interview and meet that job requirement. And you have just as much right to go and work for somebody as anybody else. So, I was reading something the other day where someone said about their guide dog, "Oh, you're really lucky to take your guide dog places." And they're like, "Well, my version of lucky might be a little bit different from your version."
Yeah.
And it's all relative, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, again, people just have no sense of what they're necessarily saying. They're thinking, "Oh, I want to be able to bring my pet everywhere."
Right.
A non-working dog. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and 100%. And I think that there are times I definitely would say to people in interviews that there are definitely times that you want to bring your disability into the interview, no matter what you're applying for. If you don't feel like you have a sense yet of that employer, it could be something that you get a sense of, because if you are going to need accommodations, so once you get the job or if you get an offer, you're going to request accommodations. Okay, you can wait until then if you want, but you also could bring it up and just see in the interview how it feels. Again, that's on a trial or error, like how you feel in an interview, but I definitely, have at times explored that myself.
I think the other thing to talk about quickly here is that, you know, and it's different obviously for different disabilities, but relating to blindness and low vision, if you need accessible equipment, or for any disability, if you need accessible equipment to do your job and you're suffering because you don't want to disclose, I've known people who have been in jobs for many years and not disclosed and just tried to do what they can do. What that does is it puts a lot of extra pressure on you. It takes a lot of extra time to do something. The mental and emotional baggage that gives you every day that you turn up to work is pretty significant. And so I would encourage you to, get what you need to be your most efficient and your best self. And that's going to take away a lot of that baggage. I mean, people think, oh, people will know, and that's worse than trying to get through it. But honestly, I haven't seen much people
I
who disclose and who have done it feel so much easier and better in their life.
Well, I think that really raises a good question, because I also know, looking at some of the DEI workforce stuff in America, is even where there was some sort of initiative within the organization to talk about disability, a bit, have it included in whether, like brown bag lunches, it'd be discussions of what is July, different things, just as you would with other things to make it part of the overall environment. That there was a lot of interesting stuff about the idea of invisible or hidden, not apparent, however somebody wants to identify that. But that you still have a huge percentage. I want to say it was about 88%, of people that if they can are not bringing it up with their employers. And when kind of digging in, now this, is the question of why? Why? I mean, people come back to, I don't want the stigma. I don't want my employer to know if they don't need to know. So example, endometriosis would be example, right? Where people, if you're not requesting the reasonable accommodation even of, flexible hours or whatever, people may not know, but but what does that say? What does that say that like so many people in society here, I think around the world, this is a common thing, feel that way, feel like I would rather try to push through it. Now, there's certain things with my blindness, I can't, like I wouldn't be able to do, but the fact that a lot of things that if people feel like they can, what does it say that they'd rather try to do that than have exercise their legal rights and disclose? I mean, what does that say about society, where we're at, where we need to go?
Yeah, it's 100% true. And I think like that's the other side of the coin, right? Where we talk about the mainstream and their ignorance, but we with people with disabilities also play into that because we don't want to talk about it and we don't want to be seen as different. And so then we fight it ourselves. And so if we're fighting it ourselves, that equality that people like Judy fought so hard for, is lost because then we don't want to identify, we don't want to embrace, we don't want to accept in ourselves. And, you hear that from everybody in a journey. I think there'd be a high percentage of people with any disability spectrum challenge that has not wanted to be identified as someone with disability at one point or another in their lives. And that says a whole bunch right there, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and then it leads to another discussion, I think a big discussion we have in the disability community, and I'm just putting it out there as a thought question, not an answer necessarily, but like there's certain disabilities that they are completely visible. There's no hiding there. There's no not being affected, in a way that people can see it. And, we see, and I'm just putting it out there again, I find it very interesting in whether it's social media and other things where people are like, which one's easier? Which one's this? And I think it's interesting when the disability community tries to say which one's easier, which one's harder, which one,
Right.
because I think that first off, why don't we talk to people from the different communities, get their take? But then there's still, if you're not, I don't have a disability that is in both communities, you're going to have your take. And I think that's where I think we have to be listening more. I do think, for myself, it's like having those conversations so I can better understand, and as an advocate, not even just in my own work, my own stuff, but as an advocate for others, just understand that real deep concern people with the invisible hidden have about asking for things, because that concern is not even possible for certain types of disabilities, right? And does that say something about society? Does that say something about employers that, oh, again, if they can see it, then they get it? Is that where
Yeah.
we're at? Like, what does that say?
Right.
Again, employers are now that's the only way they understand things. No.
I
Um,
feel I feel like it's a never ending thing, and even people in that disability spectrum have preconceived ideas about people with disability, and so sometimes we think it's like, okay, people without disability think about people with disability in this way, but also people with disability think about people with disability in that way. I've seen it many times, and I just want to tell a quick story. I used to go to this regional hub, which was about 5 hours north of Sydney every year. And there was a young man who had cerebral palsy, fairly severe cerebral palsy, was in a motorized wheelchair, was nonverbal, and then used a view eye view device screen to be able to type and speak electronically. But that young boy was very, very intelligent and did numerous campaigns with the Australian government around disability awareness. And his mother was extremely supportive, had a really strong environment and support network. But, to look at this young man, you would have assumed, that he didn't have the capability that he had. And I think, it's an important lesson to understand that we can't just judge people, by what we think. we have to have those conversations and better understand really what the situation is. And that's where people with autism, as an example, struggle, I think, because there's so many different forms and ways that autism presents itself, that it's not just one disease. And it's like the eye spectrum, right? Is like people consider, well, if you can see a little bit, you're not blind. But if I can't drive
Sure.
a car and I can't see the text on the computer, or I can't read the board in school, then why are you saying I don't have a disability? So it's that discussion as well. There's so many things in this spectrum to be able to talk about and unpack, that I think is challenging from a holistic point where we want to have that discussion and talk about things. But there is so much, and you're right, it gets tiring to try and get your head around it.
Yeah, it does. It's also just a really important reminder that when you meet one person, I think the autism community does a really good job with this, where they say when you meet one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, like where
Right.
they have that campaign. But that campaign is 100%. It's just when you meet one human being, you've met one human being, right? But like
Yeah.
when you've met one person who is legally blind with Stargardt's, you met one person. And that's where I think that sometimes people, the general society, with or without disabilities, gets like, oh man, we have to hear from all 1 billion or whatever. No, but you need to hear from some of us. You need to start listening. You know what I mean? And that's where I sometimes like flip it a little. I'm like, wait, nope, that's not what we said. That's what we say within. We to have these conversations within ourselves. We have these important conversations. We want to cut down. You need to stop making assumptions. All of that. But there are some things that we're like, no, that's not what we said.
Well, this has turned into a very broad DEI disability,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
somewhat work discussion. But it's I think they're just things that people um, have to just consider and keep in mind. And I think it's good to be able to have these discussions, because if someone who is or does have a fear factor of disability listens to this, hopefully the connotation is it might ease their thought process and actually make them have a conversation with somebody, rather than to walk the other way because of the fear factor of doing something wrong.
Hmm. Absolutely. I mean, that's it, is be, have the conversation. Even, and again, if you've met one person with one disability type who maybe scared you off about asking that particular question, I don't know why, like I get like Murray, I'm someone who's very happy to one-on-one have conversations with people really in depth. There's nothing you can say that can offend me, but I definitely have friends, and having worked the last 20 years across disability types from around the world, man, I've heard a lot of people's perspectives. I can share those before you go into certain conversations. And that's sometimes what people do want to hear, that they need a little bit of like, okay, is this okay? Is this not okay? That type of stuff.
So before we get into the other parts, I did want to just clarify really what Juneteenth was, if that's okay. Because
Yeah.
again, when we were in the last episode, we talked about the origination of the R word, to give
Hmm.
that some perspective. And I think, to your point about people understanding what DEI means and stands for, let's unpack this a little bit. So Juneteenth came about as a US holiday commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. And on June 19, 1865, Union General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston and announced that enslaved African Americans in Texas were free. And that's why Juneteenth came about. And so, obviously, very important milestone, and it occurred more than
2.5
years,
years,
yeah,
almost two and a
after
half after the Emancipation Proclamation.
that's right.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
so it just kind of goes to show that because a law changes, people's perception doesn't always change,
Right.
and it needs to follow through. So we talk about obviously the disability rights legislation, and the things that have come about for disability over the years and been ratified by the United Nations as examples. But still, many challenges exist despite those laws. And so it's really that person first culture that really makes changes to supplement the laws that get changed.
Yeah, and I think I would just add for Juneteenth, the Emancipation Proclamation was January 1st, 1863. And that, that was the law of the land. However, just keeping in mind anyone who's listening, right, the Union still had to, if the law has not been heard about, understood, or enforced, and so the Union was, as it was getting out to different states, it really, Texas being the last one, being like, this is the law of the land. 2.5 years later, you're just finding this out, and we will enforce it. So just putting that out there.
There's a great line here, Alison, that says, freedom declared is not always freedom delivered. And I think that's really an important point across all minority groups to understand. But just because we have these days, we have these celebration months, it doesn't mean that everything's great in the world. And so it's a constant challenge.
Yeah, I will say that today, I think that, so finally it was not recognized as a federal holiday until 2021, although very much recognized within communities, Juneteenth for years. But 2021 is when, so it's been 5 years. And the federal holiday before that was 1983. So it was, I think it's a long time. But yeah, this does commemorate the day, and that's an important thing, which I think that for Americans and freedom and what we're trying to push for, and that it's never has been perfect and never, but to keep pushing forward, I think it's an important day to note for sure. And I think that we, within the disability movement, just sort of jumping over there, we have days, months with July, we have days with International Day on December 3rd. A little bit different. So July for Disability Pride Month does have implications around a date, being the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law in July. However, December 3rd, so, really it doesn't have a necessary meaning behind it. I just know the UN, when it adopted International Day back in 92, it was right after it's like the decade of disability. So if you look at the history of the UN, kind of how did it all come about? International Day has gotten really re-sparked since the convention in the past 20 years. But what I would say is a little bit different between today as Juneteenth is just recognizing freedom, recognizing an important day, very important day in history, and where are we going forward is versus like December 3rd is that's a day that is, recognizing it. A lot of people think of it as celebration. I think it's a protest. It's a positive protest at this point. But how do we use it as a disability movement to raise awareness? How do we work across, all of that to be raising awareness? And so it's not just December 3rd, but it's every day of the year. So a little bit different, a little bit the same.
Yeah, 100%. I think the message is good to understand as well that there is a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, Alison. So do you want to get into our top three?
This week, I mean, is there three in this world right now? I think of Shut the F Up.
Well, you can give us your top one.
I don't know, that UFC fighter on the White House lawn about Michelle Obama. No, shut the F up. That's all I got to say. I'm not even going to say what he said. That's up there. What about you?
I think, reinforcement to me this week that we just have a long way still to go. So ignorant people who are ill-informed and have platforms that make broad statements, I think should shut the F up.
There, that's another way of putting it. No, and that goes on to Elon. He should always shut the F up, but he's been doing some of that. So that would be my number two. He's using his, so I guess he's hit trillionaire since our last speaking. Whoever needs that much money, I don't know. But anyway, he's been using his platform X to stoke some of the fire and fuel in Belfast and the Northern Ireland and the UK on an issue, just again, very creating divides that I don't think are necessary.
I think there's the broad ignorance has the biggest impacts, right? So when we think about the things that have really disturbed or disrupted society on the whole, and brought attention that isn't really welcomed or wanted, it's by these broad statements where one thing happens and then that affects everybody. And so we lose sight of the fact that people are people, and in every culture, there's good and there's bad. There's good and bad Australians. There's good and bad Americans. There's good and bad Iranians. There's good and bad Russians. So I think we lose sight of the people perspective of life, and we brush things broadly to include everyone. We need to stop that, and I think it's just so disruptive to our society, that we don't delineate what is actually happening that's bad from those demographics.
Yeah, and I want to say one thing that I want to say, like, more of actually is it's been really beautiful to watch some of the people who are visiting the US for the World Cup, from all around the world. And just some of their excitement, some of their just saying, wow, seeing America day to day and meeting Americans and just having I saw a few people from, let's see, Japan, and then I think it was a few of the Scottish fans in different interviews. We're just talking about, man, the last 5 years, I feel like we've been given really different perception in the news of what America is, and it's been really amazing to be here, to meet Americans, to enjoy things, to try the food, so
Yeah,
the funny stuff. So that has been really nice, is that I think people are actually, again, on the day to day, almost saying what you're saying,
yeah,
except, just in their natural lives of the
yeah.
experience of with other people.
And I think people are people. I remember in around like 1999, 2000, the internet really broke out across the world. And I remember just talking to people from all over the world. I had pen friends. This tells you how old I am.
Of course he would. Of course he would. Everyone he had.
I had pen friends in the 80s where we didn't have, internet, but I had a pen friend in Russia and I had a pen friend in Germany. And I just loved getting like
Mhm.
photos and letters from those people, and doing the same back. And, the world sometimes feels so different. And again, comes back to that point that if you're not like me, then I don't like you. And I felt like, in the late 90s and early 2000s, the world really shrunk because we were able to talk to each other and connect on that level. And then more recently, in the last kind of 5 years, through COVID happening and different things in politics, the world has isolated again in many ways. And so I love to see this World Cup really break down those barriers. And like you said, I saw a Scottish person in Boston talk about, I just thought Americans were crazy and this and that, but I'm here and I just see them having fun and, welcoming us and partying with us and having a nice time. And I've lost sight that they're people too, and we shouldn't just judge by what, one or two people say and do, that everybody's an individual. So, if you take nothing else away from this podcast episode, try and treat people as individuals. Everybody's a person with their own beliefs, their own, ideals and values. And so we can't lose sight of that. And I think
Mhm.
we're losing sight of that so broadly across the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have some really big personalities that are in big roles, around the world, leadership, right? And that this World Cup and some of these discussions when, I'm so thankful for my work and having friends around the world that it's like the world is so big, but it's so small as well. And there's so many things we can appreciate. I've had so many conversations with friends about the World Cup from all over the world, right? Some of which don't actually have their country in, and that's they're still mad about that. Some who do, and they're going for another country. It's like it's being able to have those conversations and keep in mind again that sometimes really there's a lot of big personalities that I have a lot of things to say to, but at the end of the day, the day-to-day people, no, those are we need to have these conversations.
Yeah, for sure. Um, any other final points on the DEI discussion? And one thing that I haven't spoken about in this episode that I feel really strongly about is that there are groups in that DEI spectrum that I think do an amazing job of collaboration across the spectrums. Um, and I think the LGBT community, Q plus, have gotten together, just from their acronym, have gotten together to support each other. And I think in the past, the disability spectrum has also done that in each other and for each other. But I haven't seen that as much lately. And I feel like that's something that I would love to see come back. I would love to see people with all forms of disability come together and collaborate more effectively to talk about that bigger argument, because
Yeah.
like you said, there's over 1 billion people with a disability around the world, and you can be in that group at any single time, day, minute, hour of your life. And so it's an important thing to collaborate about. So I just wanted to say that as kind of my final point.
Yeah, 100% that we need to we also need to recognize that I think within the disability community there's a lot of power we could have, a lot of strength if we do work together, if we understand the depth of our intersectionality, right? People with disabilities are part of every other marginalized group for sure. There's people this month, LGBTQI plus, that are part of the disability community as well. And and we want to give a big shout out to them this month and next month, right? And to be learning from them. Obviously, there's people in every race, every religion, every whatever, and we just have to think that even just within disability types, I mean, it benefits a lot to people to keep us divided. But those aren't the people that we're thinking about, right? Those are powerful, whatever. But working together, learning from each other, having discussions, and realizing that intersectionality among different disability types and among cultures, countries, beliefs is a strength of ours.
And I think, we've talked about Crip Camp a lot in the last couple of weeks, and you and the Disability Power Arena have recently done some more things on that, and I think that's great to be able to do, because when you get fractured, like I feel like we are right now, the best way to go back to what worked is to look at history and what happened that was successful. Yes, we live in a different world now than the 1970s, but essentially what worked then can definitely work now. And I think like that's important to look at that
Yeah.
history. It's important to look at Juneteenth and look at why slavery ended. It's important to look at
Yeah.
the pride aspect and what's being gained, and the understanding. So all these things, I think, are really important things to look back.
Absolutely. And I think if people are listening and haven't seen Crip Camp, A Disability Revolution, it's on Netflix. Please check it out. And I think that one of the things I'll leave kind of as a question to consider in the future, but you will hear them talking about Brown v. Board of Education, a very famous Supreme Court case on racial segregation that's talked about in Crip Camp. So when I say the disability rights movement, how did it come out of civil rights movement? How did it come out of other movements? And how can we keep doing that, working together, right? Right there when they said, oh, well, if we don't have Section 504, we have Brown v. Board. And that's the ruling where it said separate but equal is never equal. And in the early 70s, the disability movement really took that and went with it. Again, and bringing people in that didn't have disabilities, bringing in a broader movement, even with the non-disability community. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Alison. I really enjoyed this discussion. I think it's thought-provoking and inviting. Give us your feedback. Tell us what you think, and tell us what you want to talk about. And we're going to have more lives. Our
Yeah.
first live was really successful last Saturday night. We're going to have another one, not this weekend, but next Saturday night. And so come to the table, have these discussions, tell us your thoughts. We always talk about democracy and how important it is, and you have an opportunity to be able to say what's on your mind. So take advantage of that.
I'm just laughing. I'm like, when did the podcast have I said when is democracy and how important it is?
No, but I like to
No,
reaffirm
no. I
because
also, yeah, I would also like to add to that. Anyone new listening, we certainly, we really welcome you to join in these discussions, because we're talking about things, however you identify your disability, which I know when I say invisible, hidden, the areas that, we want to hear more. We want as many people to come into these conversations.
yeah, great. Check out the Disability Power Arena. How can they do that, Alison?
They can go to, let's see, they can find me on TikTok and just start stock. No. Yeah, so on TikTok, I'm all is on access or Alison Disability Rights. I have a lot of names. And there's also a Disability Power Arena TikTok account. And if you join, we're about to launch a fourth module. So you have a lot of resources that are part of the arena. You also have the live sessions. We're going to have a big live event next Thursday in there. So yeah, I bring my experience as knowing disability rights law and advocacy and trying to help people within the arena.
And I am off to a weekend Vision Victory workshop with about 15 students with blindness, low vision. We're going to be putting them through a weekend interview and then having them apply for 3 internship positions. So I'm excited about the
Nice.
art, sport, and education and job readiness coming in this weekend. So thank you, everybody. Alison, I hope you have a lovely weekend. If you're listening, thank you for supporting.
Sure.
Leave a comment, and we will catch you in episode 3 of Shut the F Up.
Shut the F up. Love y'all.
Bye.
Bye.